Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the Growth and Practice podcast. Today, I'm joined by Corey Gottlieb, founder of Replica, a company helping brands activate the people who already influence purchasing decisions every day, from retail associates and healthcare professionals to creators, partners, and advocates. Corey's built many companies across advertising, media, retail technology, and SaaS, and brings a unique perspective on where AI creates value and where human intelligence still makes the biggest difference. So, Corey, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. During our pre-conversation, I always like to learn about people's founder stories, but you and your co-founder have a really interesting one. So can you share that with the audience?
Sure. So my background, I have two lives in my work life. One is my corporate career, where I started, and I worked my way up in the world of advertising. I ran large sales organizations for ABC, CBS, Paramount Pictures Television. So I used to sell advertising. And then I decided to become an entrepreneur in 2000. I created that network of screens inside of taxi cabs in New York. So people are most familiar with those. And I sold that in 2005. And in 2007, when Facebook was first becoming a thing, my old advertising base asked me to help them figure out how to reach the audiences that were growing from 200 million to 300 million to 400 million very, very rapidly. So they knew that was a place they had to be. We built a little technology that made us a little smarter and faster than everybody else in the beginning. And we rode that for several years. And then my partner, her background was in retail. She was a fashion director of Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman for 17 years, and then went to a startup. And then she called me one day in 2016 and said, "I've got a great idea. Can we talk?" And I had met her back in the taxi cab days when I tried to get her to buy advertising as part of Neiman Marcus, which she didn't do, by the way. But we still remain friends. But her idea was a very simple one to me. And obviously we built a business on it from that point on. But at that point, the idea was Bergdorf Goodman, Neiman Marcus, and retailers around the world have beautifully curated stores and well-trained sales associates. But more and more consumers are getting inspired by what they see online and in social media and then purchasing online. So how do we bridge that gap? What could we build to bridge that gap for, the inspiration to purchase, which is trapped in the store, and the consumer who's largely more mobile than ever before? So that's how Replica started. And what we've morphed into is really a bigger ecosystem than just a brand that has sales associates, because that's a great use case for us. We work with Sephora and Desigual and many big brands. But the use case is very prominent now is adding lots of different types of sellers to your platform. So that may be your store associates. Maybe they're in one bucket and they get compensated one way whenever they inspire a sale online. But then there's the professionals who may be using your products. We have a lot of skincare brands that have doctors and estheticians as their network of professionals that physically touch the customers. And so they make recommendations now and ultimately drive e-commerce sales. And so we become this a mechanism for brands to empower all of their product experts, delineate them any way they want, and ultimately have a referral machine that is powered by human intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that word human intelligence. And that's kind of what we're going to dig into more, because I think you've really built your business around that. It's a technology company, yes, but it's powered by the human intelligence. And I was really intrigued by that. I think it goes back to the power of brands and how strong they are. And, we all have probably really good memories of our first time entering a Neiman Marcus, or even a first time entering a Sephora or something. Those are all built around an experience when you walk into that building or to that space. And that's hard to, I think, translate in this digital world and this space that is, within your own home, or you're on your phone or something like that. So tell us about, and you've been in retail for, a while and have great insight into that. So what are some of the changes you're seeing in the retail and e-commerce and social commerce and influencer marketing that most of our audience really are not paying enough attention to?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, let me first start with one point you were making about human intelligence and technology. So I think I've been building technology now for more years than I care to admit on this podcast. Back in the days of punch cards for computers, we started. And one thing that we've learned over time, and really from the very beginning, was that no technology is ever built before you have a storyboard of what you want it to accomplish. So the tech shouldn't lead just making tech for the sake of making a technology. You really have to figure out what problem are you trying to solve, storyboard it out before you ever write a line of code. So what I like to say is that our technology, which has AI built in it, of course, is really powering human intelligence that already exists in the marketplace. We're just making it more efficient, better, faster, and so forth. So that's the first part about human intelligence versus AI and so forth. But as far as the retail space is concerned, what we see is retail's going through some rapid changes and they're just accelerating, right? We saw in the early days how social media, well, first e-commerce affected, you know, legendary brands that really just had this gathering place of stores where people come in, get motivated to purchase, maybe talk to a well-trained sales associates and ultimately, walk out with a bag of stuff, right? I always use the example. I used to walk into a store. I'm looking for a white shirt. I end up with 3 bags of things because I had a great salesperson who made me try on everything and told me I looked fantastic. I know they were lying, but I do get that. So the idea is that now, that doesn't exist much anymore. So how does a brand stay relevant? How do they continue to tell people about their products and service? But most importantly, how do they gain the trust of a consumer they may never meet in person, which is, I think, the most important part. So now we add in AI, we add in, mobile purchasing, we add in e-commerce, we add in all of the things that are now consumer touch points. And you have to say, well, what's the basis of that? The basis that you still have to, I guess, achieve as a brand is having a trusted relationship with your customer base. If they don't believe in your products or they don't trust you as a company, they will not purchase from you. And unfortunately, in this world of e-commerce, brands get more and more commoditized online, right? I used to only go to Neiman Marcus for a white shirt. Now I can just Google white shirts and I can get a million different types of white shirts. So I think the biggest change that we've seen in the retail space, and we're trying to help with technology, is just this mobile fractional audience or consumer base that has lots of different options for discovery, for purchasing, and so forth, and putting the brand in front of that consumer wherever they are. And I think that's the biggest issue because it used to be, I build a store, people come. Now, the store becomes maybe a nice marketplace for you to display your products. But e-commerce and social commerce is very, very important for all of the, you know, transactions that are taking place these days. So brands need to figure out ways to still connect with customers authentically, but do it in a world where you may never meet that customer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember back to our original conversation. I think you just gave a really good example of it. But you described how you approach your customers and your business as a triangle where the consumer wins. Great, because that's what the brand really wants. That's the end goal, I would imagine. But you've got this place where not only is the brand winning and the consumer winning, but you're adding in this place where either the associate or the professional you talk about, working with estheticians and doctors that are selling product also, but they win too. It's hard to have the human intelligence, that personal relationship in this kind of digital space, unless we can't all be in the same place anymore. Not all of us travel to, conventions or anything as much anymore. We're not working in the same office buildings and we're even more disconnected from our customers and things like that. But you guys have seemed to have really gotten a sweet spot there. Tell me a little bit about how you make sure that's always leading where you're going, because every story you've told me, it really has that human aspect to it. And it's hard to lose or hard to stay focused on that in this disparate world that we're in right now. So give us a little insight there.
Yeah, so the triangle you're referring to, it by coincidence, when we look at our business, we see three stakeholders. So that's where the triangle comes from. If I had a fourth stakeholder, it would be a square. But in essence, what I was referring to is that whenever you and this is not just in technology, this is really in anything. If you're selling anything to anybody, the people you're selling to and whoever they're using that product for, everybody needs to be satisfied by using your product or you won't sell it. So in our case, we have three stakeholders. One is the brands that we sell to that enable them to reach out to their network of professionals and ultimately sell products to consumers. So the triangle is the brand, the experts or the invited sellers, and then the consumer. And in our particular case, we're very focused on making sure that the customer has a better shopping experience than if they weren't. And the customer doesn't even know who we are, by the way. We were a technology that sits behind, and nobody has, the customers don't really work with us. But when they click on a link, a referral link, they're going to go right to the e-commerce site where they get a curated shopping experience. Those items that were curated for them are waiting for them right on the e-commerce site. So every time they land on the e-commerce site, the site knows who they are and offers up, items that were curated for them. That's obviously a win for the consumer. The seller, whoever they may be, if they're a salon owner who sells shampoo in their salon, or if it's a doctor, an esthetician selling or recommending, I would say in that case, skincare routines, whoever they are, they need to be incentivized and it has to enhance their business. So in this particular case, product sales become easier. They're able to, through just a single, let's say, QR code or text message, give their customers and consumers a routine and the products they will recommend. So it's a very easy way to stay in touch with your customer base and give them, beneficial routines that are bespoke to them. And then, of course, the brand is winning because they're engaging the network of people who know their products best, and they're giving them the tools to be able to reach out beyond what they would normally be able to do without this technology, to reach more people, to affect more people. So that's the triangle that I was referring to.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important whenever any technology is built that you kind of look at who all the stakeholders are that would be touched by your technology and make sure that everybody, is benefiting from it or at least having a better experience than if your technology didn't exist at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you talk about, the consumer doesn't even see the technology. It just enhances the experience. And I think that's really important.
It's important for us because we felt that we needed to enhance the connection between the brand and the consumer. And in this particular case, that's being enhanced through that third party, that network of sellers that they invite to the platform. So
Mhm.
we didn't want to put a barrier in that the customer then had to download an application or be part of another program that, because that just is too many things, too many moving parts. So we wanted to make it really simple for the consumer. They're just seeing a link from a trusted resource. They're clicking on it and getting a curated shopping experience. So it was really important for us to make sure that, the consumer who was less likely to download an app just to buy something didn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. One of the other things we talked about that's tangential to this is owning that customer relationship. Right now and over the past, whatever, 5 years, the ecosystem has gotten so noisy. There's so many ways that you can reach out to a customer or engage with a customer, but it's disparate systems and it's complicated. And just like you said, it makes the customer have to download an app or, whatever it may be. But you have created a system and a place that really makes that simple and seamless and invisible, like I just mentioned. But,
Right.
how should leaders, and this is goes back to your original point of always starting with a blueprint before you solve a problem, which I'm 100% in agreement with. But what recommendations would you give to leaders or advice to leaders to think about balancing reach versus ownership of the customer ecosystem when they're starting to put that blueprint together?
Yeah. So I think, the reason why we had that conversation, why I think this is such a great question and so important is because With all of these options for consumers to discover products and to make purchases, brands have really stretched themselves out over every possible way to touch a customer. And, we don't advocate against that, by the way. We think that, as many touch points as a brand wants to have, that's great. But what we offer a brand is the ability to own the ecosystem. So what do I mean by that? Brands sell a lot of things through TikTok Shop, Instagram Checkout. All of these things are great and they move products, but there are inherent problems as far as a brand is concerned. One, you don't necessarily get the customer data. You don't know who's purchasing your product, so it makes it very difficult to remarket to them. Yes, you sold them a widget, but how do you remarket the next widget and the next iteration of widgets? Very difficult if you don't know who the client is because the transaction's happening on somebody else's ecosystem. So we purposely built our platform so that brands are furnishing links that drive back to their own e-commerce site. And I think, I don't need to reiterate the values of having somebody land on your own site other than buying somewhere else. But the other thing is that we've noticed over the last few years, and we see this every day, there's always news about TikTok, being banned in India or, Meta evaluating whether they're going to even allow people to have accounts that are less than a certain age group. And there's always some type of regulation that will make one platform hot, another platform not, and so forth. So brands definitely have to be involved with all the different touch points where people like to purchase. But what we like to think is they should spend their money growing their own ecosystem because that they can control. They know they're always going to have their own e-commerce site. They know they need the customer data. They want the marketing teams to be able to remarket to them. And they want the checkout process to be reflective of their brand values. They can't control the checkout process on TikTok. But if they do it on their own e-commerce site, they can. So that's the whole idea there is with all this opportunity out there to move products and so forth, and there's more and more every day. For us, we believe that the brands want to be able to build their own ecosystem and continue to grow it. And we see that in our own business. Brands who start with 100 sellers, go to 300 and 500 and 1,000 sellers. We have one brand with 15,000 sellers on the platform. So, they're building their own ecosystem and that's where the value comes in because they'll never lose that channel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've built such an incredible solution. You've been very successful. So, as you look ahead over the next year, what are the key indicators you'll be watching for to know that Replica is moving in the right direction?
Well, that's funny because for me, we're moving in the right direction if two things happen. And one of them is easy, so I'll mention that one first. If we have more customers, right? We have a nice base of customers. We're out there selling all the time, and so gaining more customers and then having our existing customers grow is certainly one of the key metrics. But there's like this intangible that if anybody is listening to this that is a entrepreneur figuring out where they want to go with their products or whatever it is, what keeps me grounded all the time is when I have a conversation with a potential customer or even just friends or family, whoever it is, and I describe what we do for a living, and then they ask a bunch of questions, and obviously the level of sophistication of questions depends on where you're sitting. But
Mhm.
there hasn't been a time in the past 5 years that this product's been in market that somebody goes, I just don't get it. No, it's not right. They're always say, oh my God, I didn't know something like this existed. Oh, wow, this is great. Now, they might not always become a customer. There's a million different reasons for that. But getting the validation that all the work you put in as an entrepreneur, obviously sales is a validation factor. We get that. But beyond the sale, just getting the right feedback and hearing from people and having them ask pretty sophisticated questions. And we've already solved for that because we've been through this before, or showing up as an expert in the field because of all the types of clients you've had and different markets you've been in, and it's GDPR in Germany versus GDPR in the UK. I mean, there's different rules everywhere. So I think that's the other measure of success for us is the more meetings we have, the more clients we talk to, we get excellent feedback. And so, that's the other validation as an entrepreneur you look for. Sales are the obvious one, but just, hearing the feedback, being able to answer the questions in a positive manner, I think is also a really good validation.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I heard you say in our other conversation, and you mentioned it a little bit here, but I want to highlight it for everybody, is when your customers come back to you and say, well, what if we could do this? Right. And that seems like another validation because they're coming back to you as the expert, somebody who's already proved that that you can solve their problem. And I've heard you tell little stories all along where people are coming back and doing that. And I think that's a great, another great validation of a company that's doing things.
I don't think that's unique to us. I think anybody who sells anything to anybody, wants to first start with a relationship of trust and then earn that trust again every day. And
Yeah.
so, we respond quickly to phone calls. We're on meetings with clients. We're using our own AI to evaluate the programs that are in our platform so that we can feed back real-time data and make their programs more successful. And because we do that, yes, we've been given the opportunity to become trusted resources. We do extra programming for clients if they need it, because their own tech teams sometimes in these big companies are very, very difficult and we're faster and less expensive. So we just get it done for them. And so I think you're right. I mean, the ask from clients to go beyond what the original scope of work was is another validation for you. And it also embeds you deeper with the client. If you start connecting all their legacy systems into the new system like ours, or connect our system into theirs, that would probably be more likely. They become more dependent upon making sure that ecosystem works. And we would be stewards of that ecosystem in that case.
Mhm. And that just underlines the importance of the human intelligence. The seems like it's the core of your business, and it is definitely a differentiator out there. There's so many companies where you don't actually ever talk to a real human, and you just highlighted at least 4 or 5 of the reasons why your company is so successful, and they all came back to that human intelligence piece.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. AI is just in its infancy. I mean, what we do with AI now just blows me away. How fast we could bring out new products, MVPs of things we've been thinking about for 6 years that we literally, can code in a day. That's amazing. But again, just like the blueprint conversation we had, and a few of the other conversations, if you're building technology that is powering existing things in the world, existing relationships with, brands and consumers, and you're providing a better way for them to be able to communicate, to show the values of of the products that they have and so forth. That's how AI and technology powering something or making something that exists much more intelligent, efficient, and beneficial for all the three stakeholders we talked about.
Fantastic. Well, I could talk to you forever on this, but I always like to end with this. So, for our founders, operators, and business leaders that are listening, what's one thing you believe they should be paying attention to right now that could have an outsized impact on their business over the next year?
Yeah, I think it's funny, with AI becoming so democratized and people having access to it, there are more and more people who can build things. So I think what entrepreneurs should understand is if you maybe thought of a niche that needs to be filled and you want to build a business based off of that, do your human intelligence homework first. Speak to who your stakeholders are going to be, who you would be selling this product to, why you would be selling it to them, and who would be consuming it, and understand what might be broken in that current situation. Maybe not even broken, just can be improved upon, and then jump in with the technology. Because if you have that validation before you build the technology, everybody can build technology, but the people who understand what the human intelligence is now and what needs to be fixed in it or what can be enhanced with it, that's going to be the next technology that drives super fast growth. Because I think adoption rates have also gone up, right? And nobody's afraid anymore to download an application or to use it. They all kind of look the same. Buttons are always, kind of in the same place. If you know how to use Instagram, you know how to use TikTok and so forth. So, you know, uh, with all of that being said, n- you know, being smart and understanding what you're building for will give you the fastest returns on investment.
Yep. Fantastic advice. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time. I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from this conversation is really, while technology continues to evolve and it's so quick. I mean, like just you mentioned so many examples, and tomorrow we can go build a whole ecosystem that took 6 months ago. It is crazy, but everything always comes down to those people, relationships, trust, and solving the real problems. So, going back to your blueprint at the very beginning to get to what the real problem is and develop that in short amount of time takes a lot of human intelligence. And I appreciate you sharing your journey and your perspective with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and I wish you all the best success with your podcast.
Thank you very much, Corey.